Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Susquehanna Folk Festival Coffee House stage. We have a very interesting event as our next feature. We have a Meet the Masters session with Michael Doucet of Beausoleil. Meet the Masters is a series of artist interviews that we're doing in front of you, our live audience, and they're being conducted by our festival intern, who is David Misal. He's an American Studies doctoral student at Penn State Harrisburg. And David? And again, David will be interviewing Michael Doucet, who's a very important figure in American folk music, particularly Cajun music. He hails from Louisiana. He's best known as the founder and frontman of Beausoleil, who's going to be our feature artist this afternoon, 6 p.m., down on the main stage. Of course, they play Cajun with blues, country, jazz, and Zydeco. Zydeco. Michael is also very well known for his research into the roots of that type of music, and he is a National Heritage Fellowship recipient. So please join me in welcoming Michael Doucet and David Misal.
Hey, I just want to thank everybody for being here today. These are a lot more fun to do when there are people actually listening to what we have to say. So thanks for being here. But you're not here to hear me speak. You're here to hear Michael speak. And so we're just going to start with the simple question, how did you get started down this path? There are a lot of people who play music, but there are not a lot of people who can turn it into a long-term career. How did you go from a kid with a banjo and a fiddle to what you are now?
Practice. Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here also. Thank you all so much. Our culture, we call the Acadian culture of Southwest Louisiana, it was a small-knit group, and we occupied about 22 parishes. We have civil parishes in Louisiana. About 22 of those parishes are French-speaking. And I grew up in a French Acadian family. I think we're 10th generation. Our ancestors came from the area of Western France, Poitou and La Rochelle. They left from that. They moved to the New World as early as 1604, most of them in 1627. So we were there 3 years before Jamestown, wherever that is. And when they were in Nova Scotia, it wasn't Nova Scotia, actually. It wasn't even named. It was called Nouvelle France. And because of the Acadians being able to live and learn among the Native Americans, this particular tribe is called the Micmac, they survived and they flourished, and it became the first democratic society up there. Now and I'll just tell you a quick story that for about 150 years they lived there pretty much in peace, and they refused to take arms against the English or the French. Well, when the English finally won over that part, which they called Acadie, hence the word Acadians, or Acadians. When the English took over there in 1713 after the Treaty of Utrecht, the Acadians said you could become English subjects and stay there, or if you did want that, you'd have to leave. Well, somehow they didn't get the memo, and they stayed there because they said, well, we were here first. We've been here for 150 years. Well, the English, as those things been, they wanted to take over the world and colonize everything. So it was a business effort to depose of as many Acadians as they could. So it was a terrible thing. In French, it's called le grand arrangement, which means the big movement. And basically, it happened not too long from this. The date that they started this thing was August 15th, 1755. And what they did, they separated families, husband and wives, children's, uncles, and all that. And they put them in these frigates that was just supposed to deposit them within the 13 colonies. You're talking about this diaspora consisted of uprooting 12,000 people. and it was a terrible act of genocide also. So they went along. They were just deposited along the 13 colonies, and some of them were must have been rowdy because both sides of my family were sent back to France. No North America for you, and actually they were awarded Spanish land grants in 1763 when France seceded the Louisiana Territory to the Spanish. So that's how we got to Louisiana. Okay, that's a quick story about that. How I grew up, it seems like it was one big family. Everybody knew each other, and French was predominant. You just spoke French. You didn't think about it. We knew our heritage. My grandmother always kept us aware of that. And so it was that kind of environment. And we had, my father had a large family. They had 8 brothers and sisters. And they lived side by side because of the land distribution. And so you could go to anybody's house and there'd be a piano there, or guitar there, or banjo there, fiddle there, etc. So that's what happened there. For me, I had an uncle who was married to my aunt, and his name was T. Will, and he was the kind of guy my mother told me not to hang around with, so immediately that's directed to him. He also was a gambler. He had a racetrack, and where we come from, it's a quarter horse racetrack. It was a quarter of a mile straight down, and in fact, it was called the China Ball Racetrack, and I remember as a kid, they used to put me up in a China Ball tree to see who won because they had flags on both sides. But anyway, so he was a fiddle player. He played guitar and banjo, etc. And so that's where I first touched the fiddle and learned how to play. We couldn't take it from his house because we had too many relatives, but that's how I first learned how to play. And it was not really. Someone once asked me, what was the first Cajun song you learned? I said, well, Lonza Lafayette and all this. To me, it was like learning a Christmas carol. When was the first Christmas carol you learned? For Christmas. So this was usually for a party. So that's how, it was just an environment that I grew in.
Very good. So you were talking about sort of, this question, and I'll have to remember not to ask that question of what was the first song that you learned. But speaking of songs and such, can you talk at all about players and other figures who may have influenced your development and kind of how that plays into the repertoire? Because you're a very diverse player with a lot of different things that you play, things that you do. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of it for us?
Well, we're lucky enough to have that. We had some master musicians that nobody really made a living playing this music. It's the kind of music I learned from this was what we call kitchen music or back porch music. It's just simple music. We weren't playing for a lot of people, but that's how the songs were carried over, and it was easy to share that way, like a kind of a jam in a way. I was fortunate enough to have T. Will, my uncle, who showed me 3 songs. You asked me, Alonzo Lafayette, Jolie Blonde, and St. Louis Blues, which I thought it was a Cajun song. Anyway, he never told me it wasn't. And then from there, and they had an accordion player, Don Montouset, by the house, so we'd go there and just play along with him. But it was actually, for me, it was when I was a senior in high school. One of the relatives died, Horace Foreman, and he was, in fact, Alan Lomax recorded him back in the 30s, and he died, and we could remember going to his house and listening to play, and I said, did anybody get any recordings of him? And nobody had any recordings. So it kind of turned my mind to, said, well, when these guys go, because he was probably 70 years old, and this was like in the late 60s, that's it. There was no record of it. So I kind of got a friend of ours from Scott, where we're from, kind of got into this thing with going visiting elder musicians like Don Montouset, Felix Richard, different people, Doc Guidry, different people about that. And for me, I was always interested in the source. To make a long story short, what really prompted this is that we were asked to go. My cousin and I were playing in a little bar dive for whiskey, but we were speaking French. See, in those days, it was cute to speak French. You spoke French. Oh, that's nice. Here's a beer. Great. Anyway, this French promoter came in, and he asked us if we wanted to go to play a festival in France. What do you say? Of course. And we're supposed to stay for 2 weeks, and I ended up staying for 6 months. It was such a revelation because in France they were having their folk revival as we had in the States 10 years previous. And what was amazing to me, they knew more songs than we did almost. They knew more about our culture than we did, and they looked at us as a youngest form of creative French folk songs. And so that prompted me, it woke me up right there because I could hear the same ballads sung by these French people my age, my peers, as I heard my aunts singing. So I came back with this fever to kind of put this together because there was no history of the music. There was no history of where the songs came from. There was no history of how it was developed that I felt that it was as France was. So I went out and I was awarded different grants through the National Endowment of the Arts and to go out and one of the first ones to transcribe fiddle players. So I tried to find all these fiddle players and not just there was nobody really well known, but it was just the best that I could find. And some of those people you asked for was like Canry Fontenot, Maurice Connor, Dewey and Will Balfa, Lionel Lele, and some other people. And Dennis McGee. I think Dennis McGee is the one because we were lucky enough. Dennis McGee, the first time this French music from Southwest Louisiana was recorded it began in 1928 to the golden years, 1928 to 1936. And that's primarily 80% of all our traditional music was recorded back then. And I was lucky enough that Dennis was still around. Now, Dennis was born in the 1890s. So, it was. I didn't even know he was still alive. And so we became fast friends, and I'd go there and visit him a lot. In fact, I recorded 156 songs from him and then just stopped. I said, there's no way I'm even going to learn that. Of course, the next time I go, here comes another song. So it was a one-on-one kind of master situation, as it was in Europe in the old days in education. You go to different towns or villages where the master of mathematics or English or French or any language, you'd go and study from the master. And so that's what I was doing. So in Buddhist terms, he would be my guru, and because he was known, but I mean he quit playing. He quit recording like 33, and he quit playing for 30 years. And then he was rediscovered. And so that's what I wanted to do, is get these guys out, that they would be known within our society again. So that was the lucky thing, is having people of two generations from me being able to be there and being open enough for me to go there and talk to them and learn.
That's fantastic. Something you were talking about there is the need to preserve, the heritage that we have. And my understanding is that you were a National Heritage Award winner in 2005, was it? Or good. See, I know my stuff. Can you talk to us a little bit about sort of that program and other ways that you have tried to preserve and transmit this really important cultural legacy, and kind of how that's going currently?
Well, you got to understand, we thought it was important. The majority of people didn't. You got to understand, this was not Cajun music. It didn't exist. We never called this Cajun music ever. Never used the word Cajun. I promise you. We call this music French music or like Cajun, and that was just a given. The thing about preserving, it was like we never really thought about that because it was still alive. But like I said before, when someone passed away, all their stories, all their tunes passed away too. So then, let's archive. And so we got another grant, Dewey Balfa and I, where we'd go out and do exactly what I'm doing now and tell the stories in public schools for free for the schools. That sounds like a great thing, right? Yeah, well, you wouldn't believe how many principals refused us to get even in the schools because of their projections about what this music was. Okay, this music is like it's a gamut. Okay, it's popular music. It was meant for the people, Acadian people, for our community. Well, as that grew up, it became just house parties, and beyond that, it became dances. So dances, you drink, you become rowdy. So, okay, one side of the story, well, these people drink a lot and they play, and a lot of these songs about that. But on the other side, you have a very tranquil life that tells the story of ballads and that are like 14 verses that are people learn directly from another individual. So for us, we wanted to cover the whole basis. So we fought very hard for that and to get kids, mainly kids, interested in that. So I did that. And then from there, I went to university, and I created a course at ULL. We got a grant to do this. And I taught for 7 years. The name of the course was French Music in Louisiana, Opera de Zydeco, or Zydeco, or whatever they do. And I loved it because you can really, because this is folk music in a way, but it's got so many forms to it and so many different, it's not just the different instrumentations, it's the way and the areas in Southwest Louisiana. So I was pretty fanatical about that. So that's what I did.
Well, you've got your fiddle sitting in your lap. And I'll give you a second to take a swig of coffee. But, you know, it's always, I think, good to hear something representative. Now, I know that's really hard for you because there's so many things that you do. And we were having a conversation before this started about, is there a sort of stereotypical Cajun music? And I was saying, well, of course there is. And he was saying, not so much. So I've got something to learn too, okay, which is why this is so great. But something representative, something that stands out, just give the crowd a sample quick. And don't forget that they are playing later this afternoon, this evening. So make sure that you come back to hear that full set, okay?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, you know, that's it's a gamut, because what you hear now, where people play are two-step and waltzes, but in Dennis McGee's era, in the era of the turn of the century, the 19th century, they were playing contredanses, reels, mazurkas, you know, polkas, different kind of tunes. And with the what happened is when we were, like I said, these people, our ancestors were deported, so they brought to Louisiana only what they could carry. And if you think about it, they're in Nova Scotia, right? Guess what? Cotton doesn't grow in Nova Scotia. Flax does. So they had to, even their vestments that they wore was linen. And when they got to flax does not grow in Louisiana. Our bugs are too big. They like it. So they grow cotton. So they even had to change their whole costumes or their clothes they wear regular. So the music changed. So this is going on and on like that. So the earliest part was, of course, ballads, singing, unaccompanied ballads. That's the original source. And I can sing that and play a song, or just to give you an idea.
Whatever you like.
This is unaccompanied ballad called La Maîtresse. Let's do this one. It's called La Fille de 14 ans. It's kind of a sad song about a girl of 14. This is probably in the 16th century. So a girl of 14 in the 16th century France would be a girl about 45 years old today. And because if you were 14 and not married, you know, so the father put her off to the convent. And her suitor, he went to war. Well, he comes back after 4 years, and she's 4 years older. She says, well, you asked her dad in marriage, well, what about now? She says, oh, she just died 3 days before. So it's that kind of song. So I'll sing a little bit about that. Y'en a une fille de 14 ans, voilà, grand Dieu, elle est si belle. Un jour elle dit de son papa, papa, je veux me marier. Où tais-toi, joli filet, toi pas encore 15 ans, mais ton beau-frère, il va se mis dans un couvent, faudra prier avec les orphelins, prier tous les jours, prier tous les soirs, bien à ses genoux, mais son beau-frère, il était au gare, 4 ans de temps, il l'a battu, qu'on a revenu de sa révolte. Doit te roger auprès la belle à toi, elle est plus là, elle est enterrée, toi joue longtemps. Comment bébé, t'es dans la tête, on ne va jamais voir encore. Bonsoir, bonsoir, mes beaux yeux noirs, t'es dans la tête, moi je t'aime toujours.
Yeah, go for it.
So that's how the tunes got to Louisiana. This is one of the oldest tunes I know. I learned this from a guy by the name of Edward Alamo, who lived way, way, way down the basin, almost close to the Mississippi River. He's a turtle farmer, and people used to laugh, a turtle farmer? He's a millionaire. You'd be surprised how many people he turned. But this is a song he learned. It's kind of like a jig. I just call this a jig. He said he learned it. It was close to Grand Isle, one of the last Berry Islands in Louisiana, and he heard a bunch of Frenchmen playing this song, and so he picked it up, and so here it is. I think it's a lot of different remnants of this song, this tune have entered other songs and to make new songs. There you go. Thank you.
Then, as we're wrapping up here today with this interview, there's always something that I'd like to do, and that is to just say, I obviously don't always know the right questions to ask. You know, this is an important lesson to learn. So I always like to take the last question and simply throw it out there to say, I'm sure that I missed something that you want to say to the people, something that you want to make heard. And I want to give you that opportunity as we close out here today. And I, once again, want to remind everybody to come see them play again later this evening and afternoon, okay? But I'll let you take us out with your final closing thoughts.
Well, thank you, David. I think you're a very good interviewer. You got to understand, I don't listen to anything you ask me. I just say what I want to say. It makes it a lot easier. I'm just kidding. I'm terrible like that, you know. But no, I think. I mean, like David said, it's a very special music. This is, you know, this is an American music. It's only created in one part of North America, and that's Southwest Louisiana. But just because of those reasons, because of what it was back then. It continues to evolve, but not in the way that it did for so many years. It was basically French from the mid-1700s all the way, I'd say, to probably 1923, because 1923 there was the first bridge for cars that was built over the Mississippi River, and that really, because we were isolated people, and everybody, you've heard U.E.P. Long's term, "Every man a king." Well, it kind of is that way in Louisiana. They were awarded land grants so they could farm, they could fish. They'd have, it's like Louisiana's kind of place, kind of like this, but there's no rocks. And if you throw seeds, you got to run, man. And So it was a pastoral place and a very difficult place because of the humidity, which we talked about. But nevertheless, to make a living there, it wasn't that bad. So every man was like a king, and every woman was a queen, and the families were tight knit, and they knew by your last names where you were, because we said there were 1,200 Acadians who were deported from Acadie, and so they all kind of kept kind of a network going on, and I think that's really important for this music, and that's how it was developed. And so I don't even know what I was getting at, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because we don't know what the question was anyway. So the last thing I wanted to tell you is that this is special music, and for us, and for my passion for my verve, what I just wanted everybody to have that same idea of the incredible history and perseverance of this music to exist to 2019, because of course people in the 20s, like my parents' generation, were punished for speaking French in the schoolyard, and then now they have French immersion for kids. I mean, it goes round and round. My grandfather actually spoke and knew how to write French, and he's got beautiful handwriting. So it just evolves. But the thing is, I think it was the thing that brings this music together, what we call French music of Southwest Louisiana. It's a heartfelt music. It's like a shared music. It's not that difficult. Anybody can play it, I promise you, even you, Dave. Anybody can play this thing. And the deal is that it's you have people cook for you, or you play for them, or people dance. It's a shared experience, but it is so valuable, and it's so fragile at the same time, and it gets distorted. It's not commercial. But we kind of made it commercial. We Cajunized the United States back. That's basically what Beausoleil wanted to do in 1986. I wanted to play in every state of the Union and bring this music to them, and we did, even North and South Dakota. So that's a big one. So I think it's just that it maintains what it is and it has that same integrity. That's the main stuff. So anyway, thank you all for listening. Any questions? Do you ask questions?
You can take questions if
yeah,
you'd like.
any questions
We have
out
a
there?
few moments left.
Yes. I did. I'm so glad we left. I'm so glad we were deported. Well, everything changes. Yeah, but we still have families over there. They do this big conventions over there. It's called it's like family get together and stuff like that. The same names. So the same things like Doucet, LeBlanc, Boudreaux. They're up there in Nova Scotia too. Yeah. But the music is not the same. It's too cold. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you, Dave. That was good, Dave.
You're a good guy.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, David. Let's have one more big hand for them.